Bienvenida del Partido Comunista aquí en Irlanda, para vosotros, que te dan la bienvenida.
If I could, Magali,
Sí,
ask you just to briefly outline small
Magali,
history of the
¿puedes
Cuban Five
brevemente
before we do
contarme
the
cosas
interview?
sobre la campaña del Cubano 5, antes de hacer la entrevista? ¿Vale?
Just want to go ahead, just a brief history, okay?
Bueno, buenos días. Agradecemos esta oportunidad de poder saludar por esta vía al pueblo de este país. Nosotros los cubanos nos sentimos muy orgullosos de poder viajar por el mundo y ver el reconocimiento que hay hacia nuestro país. Queremos dar las gracias a esta oportunidad que tenemos de poder divulgar cómo hemos sufrido el terrorismo en nuestro país, el dolor que ha costado a nuestro pueblo y, por supuesto, la situación que confrontan nuestros 5 hijos antiterroristas en esa injusta prisión que cumplen en Estados Unidos desde hace 14 años.
Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us. We feel very privileged here for us to come here to Ireland to highlight the campaign of the Cuban Five. I'm a mother of one of the Cuban Five, and I am travelling here in Ireland to let you know all about it. It is 14 years since their arrest a couple of days ago. We're very privileged that you invited us here.
Okay, well maybe we'll just sit down.
Okay.
Tremendous achievements of the Cuban Revolution, especially in terms of the health and education sector, which we in Ireland are in awe of, in fact. But there's not much coverage of your country's horrendous attacks upon the Cuban people over its recent revolutionary history. And if I could ask you, Doctor, could you briefly inform us on some of the terrorist attacks that the Cuban
I am one of the daughters of the victims of terrorism in my country.
Desde el año 59 hasta la fecha, víctimas del terrorismo.
Since 1959 to date, there's been 4,900 victims of terrorism in our country.
Y estos hechos de terror.
And more than 3,500 that are incapacitated as a result of terrorism as well. All this, of course, is the hatred from America that they are begrudging us having our independence.
Y de querer tomar nuestras propias decisiones.
And they want to take their own decisions for us.
Hasta la salud humana.
They have tried to attack us on several occasions, and they also have attacked us from a chemical point of view, and both on our agriculture and they've attacked our agriculture with chemicals, and also our people.
Dante en jefe Fidel Castro.
It's because it started trying to attack and trying to get and kill Fidel Castro.
Y a otros dirigentes del país.
And other people who were governing the country.
Como esto fue en vano, decidieron entonces atacar nuestra economía.
Then they tried to attack our economy.
Quemaron centrales azucareros.
They burnt many of our buildings.
Atacaron a zonas de pueblos costeros.
They attacked a lot of the coastal areas around the island.
Que introdujeron armas biológicas para destruir nuestra caña y nuestro tabaco.
They introduced biological weapons, biological chemicals to destroy our tobacco plantations and our sugar plantations.
Pusieron bombas en barcos.
They put bombs in boats.
Y así hasta que en la década del 70 comienza una oleada de atentados contra oficinas de cubana de aviación en diferentes partes del mundo.
And also they tried attacking all the different Cuban aviation offices across the world.
Mi padre sufrió las consecuencias en 3 ocasiones cuando le pusieron bombas en un avión de México hacia La Habana, de Jamaica a La Habana, y la última que falleció cuando venía de Barbados.
My father, who was a pilot, was attacked on 3 occasions. One on a plane coming from Mexico and the other from Jamaica. The third one, of course, was the fatal one coming from Venezuela.
Niños cubanos por el dengue hemorrágico.
Okay. The acts that they have committed against our country are horrendous, including the killed, mataron?
101 niños cubanos.
Yeah, 101 children were killed with an introduction of a dengue type 4 that was fatal to their children in the hospitals.
Pero si fuera poco, arreciaron el bloqueo y no nos dejaron comprar medicamentos para tratar de salvarlos.
And on top of that, then they could have been saved if the blockade wasn't there, because they tried to get the sufficient medicine to treat them, but they were blocked.
En las décadas del 90 empiezan entonces a bombardear hoteles donde existían turistas.
Then they started with the tourism. And from the 90s onwards, they blew up several hotels and injured several tourists. Y mataron también.
Y como es conocido, mataron al turista italiano Fabio Di Selmo, que hace recientemente cumplió 15 años de su asesinato.
And one person was killed. He was an Italian tourist, and that was exactly 15 years ago. For all these reasons, we had a reason to defend ourselves. And all we could do then was to try to send our people to Cuba to investigate where this terrorism was coming from, to get to the heart of it.
Para que lograra dar.
And just to find out exactly what they were preparing to infiltrate the group and when they were coming over to attack us. Okay, we found out also that they were going to do an attack on Ronald Reagan, and they were going to plant bombs on planes within North America. We were cooperating with the FBI and giving them this information. However, when we gave them this information, they turned it on us.
Que lo que estaba salvando era vidas norteamericanas.
¿Qué?
Que lo que estaban salvando era, con esta información, vidas norteamericanas.
It was clear with this information we were giving them, we were hoping that we would prevent any more terrorism within North America and to defend the American people as well as Cuban.
No sé si respondí su pregunta.
No.
That's the answer to your...
Okay, thank you very much. Extremely comprehensive. Talking about the attack in 76,
hablando del ataque del 1976.
Your father, and also it must be said, 55 Cubans, 11 Guyanese, and 5 North Koreans were murdered. Could you just tell us maybe briefly about the actual attack?
Como le contaba anteriormente, estos ataques se llevaban por grupos de terroristas que radican en Miami.
These groups were the groups that were formed in Miami from the Miami Cubans that were anti-Cuban. Okay. They had at one stage planned to put a bomb on a Cuban airline on the 9th of June, but something happened with the plane and was taken out of action, and it was avoided, luckily. They tried, they diverted then to attack the Chilean consulate in the United States of America. The murderers were Orlando Bosch and Posada Carriles. And they went to Venezuela. Okay, they went to Venezuela and they got in touch with the president, Carlos Andrés. Okay, they said that they spoke with the president and they told him, as they had been successful in organising the Chilean uprising in the 11th of September, where a lot of people were killed, they were going to do, this was successful, so they were going to have another try with the Cubans. This Cuban airline contained 55 Cuban people. ¿Cuánto eran en el grupo de Triba?
De esgrima. Es que cubanos eran 55 cubanos. El resto eran coreanos y guyaneses.
The majority of them were from a successful fencing team that were coming back delighted, having won the gold medals in the South American Games, Caribbean Olympics it was called, but it was held in Venezuela. Murderers went on the same plane as them. Okay. Not the intelligence. The people that were planning it, but more the people that were actually going to activate the bomb. Okay, the people that were actually putting the bomb on boarded the plane in Venezuela, and when it stopped to refuel in Barbados, they got off. They were able to make and trace a call that they made to Posada Carriles saying the autobús de los perros, the dog's bus is going to go down. This is just very hurtful for us, even 36 years later, because we know the murderers are still walking free around Miami. They give them military decorations.
Le hacen homenajes.
They give them homages. When the true strugglers and peacemakers are in jail. That's why we're trying to look for help.
Es que nos ayuden en nuestra causa.
We're trying to get support that Posada Carriles is actually brought to justice.
In one of the murders, Orlando Bosch, how has the American government treated him?
¿Cómo se trataba la...
Tell us the origin of the anti-Cuban groups in Miami and what class of Cubans originally immigrated post-revolution. You know, these are the groups that...
The anti-Cuba.
Yeah.
He was always kind of praised and given special treatment, but he has died about a year ago, and he died with a glorious, he went out in glory, and not a state funeral, but a very highlighted funeral.
Su historia de terror, la historia de terror que Orlando Bosch dejó es bien grande.
The history that Orlando Bosch left behind him is one of terrorism, a long one of terrorism.
No solo en Cuba, en los Estados Unidos también.
Not just in Cuba, but as you could see here, like in Chile and other places as well.
Sin embargo, el gobierno de los Estados Unidos dijo que Orlando Bosch era un hombre no confiable y perjudicial para los Estados y que perjudicaba al gobierno de los Estados Unidos, por eso no le daba entrada a su gobierno.
And even though they've said that he was a man that you couldn't really trust, and that for that reason alone they couldn't allow him to get into government.
Sin embargo, Bush padre, que era presidente en aquella época, le dio un perdón presidencial y lo dejó entrar.
And the father of, even with that in mind, and that's been stated publicly, the father of George Bush Jr., the older man, gave him a presidential pardon for all that he'd committed, all the crimes that he's committed in terrorism in the States.
Asimismo.
And Posada Carriles was also tried to attack Panama, but he was apprehended, but they still gave him a presidential pardon. I'm talking about the Miami people, the anti-Cuban people. En tu opinión, ¿qué es lo que...
Sorry, just before that question, you've mentioned about the Bush family, and it's a well-known fact that the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, was in cahoots with well-known narco-terrorism out of Miami, funding them, doing anything that was necessary to attack Cuba and its allies in Venezuela. And I'm just, you know...
Where is it all joining up?
Where is it all joining up? The other thing is, who funds all this? You know...
Narco-terrorism?
Yeah.
Narco. Okay, we're first going to answer the first question that I asked her, sorry, because it biddled it. The people that have gone to Miami are dissidents from the country. They wanted to go to Miami. Some of them have been in jail, and they just wanted to... they're anti the regime of Cuba, the current regime of Cuba.
Ellos tienen...
Unfortunately, they have hatred in their hearts for our country, but they are not actually either accepted by the United States. That's why they've got so clannish and have kind of built up a strength like that. They wouldn't be kind of accepted in the other Latin groups that have emigrated. They're distinct. There are several groups that have been formed of Miami dissidents, of Cuban dissidents in Miami.
Alpha 76.
Alpha 77. Sorry, 76. Fundación
Cubano-Americana.
The Foundation of Cuban Americans.
Hermanos al Rescate.
And Brothers to the Rescue. They're all kind of groups that have individually gone their own way, and they're not really joined together. They're not, so they're cells of different groups, but they're not united in what they really want to achieve. So that's why it's kind of a bit all over the place, if you like, and they don't have that much unity.
Pero influyen mucho.
But they influence very much the votes when it goes to Florida. The money she just thinks comes from the local TDs, I was going to say, the local politicians, the US government, and also obviously from rich people that have emigrated and made a lot of money in Florida. Also from the CIA. And she says before that they know that Bush, the father, provided money through the CIA for this group, for these groups, and this support.
He was the former leader former director of the CIA.
Of the CIA, yes.
Realmente.
Okay, she's saying that it's very sad to see that their own Cuban people are going abroad and they're coming back and they're attacking Cuba, but they're financed mainly by the CIA.
Most people in Ireland, we view the illegal terrorist blockade of Cuba is outrageous and it has a devastating effect on the Cuban economy. Could you explain maybe briefly what those effects are, especially maybe in your own terms of the health and education, access to pharmaceuticals, this kind of thing?
Okay. There was a law called Ley Burton, no?
Sí, Hel Burton y Ley Torricelli.
Torricelli and Hens Burton.
Okay, there were two laws passed, Burton y Araceli, and that really intensified the blockade against Cuba.
Yo soy doctora.
I'm a doctor.
Y me da pena que existiendo equipos médicos y medicamentos de última generación no lo podamos emplear en personas que están muriendo.
I'm a doctor and I'm so sorry to see the existence of great and talented doctors, and at the end of the day we can't save our patients sometimes because of on account of the blockade.
Apropiado.
The worst of all is to see children die with not being able to get the proper medicine to keep them alive. Okay, just for example, if we need to do any kind of a scan on anybody or something goes wrong with the machine, we just don't have the facilities to fix it, and this is what really creates the problem within the hospitals.
Gracias a la solidaridad.
Thanks to the solidarity.
Gracias a personas de buen corazón.
Thanks to people with good hearts.
De alguna forma u otra hemos obtenido medicamentos para casos especiales.
We have, by hook or by crook, gotten the medicines for people who are really in urgent need of them.
Ayuda para sacar a un niño y llevarlo a otro país.
Or we take the child out to another country and the country offers us the medical facility in their country. We produce our own line of pharmaceuticals as well, but obviously we don't have the scientific research as much as we would like to have to contradict all the effects of the blockade.
Earthquake in Haiti and the fabulous work done by the Cuban brigades, the medical training unit there in Havana, I think it's called EFAM, and it was noted when the earthquake in Haiti happened, the Cuban doctors mixed among the people.
They were there before the terror.
While the American health workers were helicoptered in from the Dominican Republic in their plush hotels, and it was noted at the time that the Americans treated, I think it was noted at the time, over about 863 people. This is what was recorded within a 2 or 3 week, and yet the Cuban doctors treated 213,000. And in this context, one can see the magnificent achievements in the revolution of Cuba.
Jose Marti, which is one of their leaders there, has always said that Cuba will always be there to help people, and this is why this isn't a new thing. They go to all different underdeveloped countries.
Remoto.
In Peru, they went also when there was an earthquake.
In Pakistan.
In Pakistan. They went in the place of Pakistan. It was a very cold part of the country, and they wouldn't be used to that kind of temperatures, but they went and helped the people of Pakistan as well. It's obvious ethic in our medical system is to prevent any kind of illness and prevent any kind of fever in people. That isn't to say that we don't treat. Obviously, we treat the illnesses, but our major aim is to prevent it. That there would be a country so near us that people were dying of cholera that we wouldn't go to help them. That would be just impossible for us.
Your son and 4 other brave men were arrested and imprisoned in the US. Could Could you just tell us briefly what your son and the other four were doing before their arrest?
Okay.
Tell me about their arrest and how did it happen?
Okay. My son didn't actually tell me what he was going to do in Miami. He's an economist, and he was travelling to. He told me he was travelling to Cuba to deal with some economic investment that a company wanted to make in Cuba at the time. For me, it was a huge surprise and a horrible, very hurtful for me to find out actually what they were doing in Miami. Naturally, that was my first initial reaction. But then, as time went by, I felt very, very proud of him, even though it was painful that he would go to represent our country and get the information about the anti-terrorists. Never realise or imagine that my son would be involved in trying to work for the well-being of our country and to save so many lives.
About the arrest and how did it happen?
Nos puede contar cómo. Okay, they were all arrested on the same day at the same time. Very early in the morning, they were taken from their beds in different locations around Miami and taken to be questioned with the federal state police. After many hours under questioning, the constant question was to become a traitor for their country, to denounce the government of Cuba. Knowing and realising then that they weren't going to do that, or they weren't going to go with their propositions, they arrested them and took them into custody. What they really wanted to do was to stay in Miami and to become a traitor to Cuba.
Okay, could you just tell us briefly what they were actually accused of and what charges they were tried on?
They accused Fernando, which is Magali's son, Ramon y Gerardo, of not having the proper papers to be in Miami, and they couldn't take that against Antonio Guerrero y René Gonzales because they were actually born in America.
Despite a heroic defence.
Y a pesar de una defensa heroica.
Did your son and others get?
Okay, we're just doing it little because René and Antonio are two separate cases insofar as they were American citizens. René was given a sentence of 15 years with the stipulation that when he completed that, he had to stay at least 3 years more in North America. I think we probably know about that.
In Florida.
In Florida, not in North America, in Florida. Antonio got a minimum life sentence of 18 years, a minimum. And when he actually completes the sentence, he would have 5 years to do and to stay in Florida. Now, the ironic thing is that they have been told that they are not to go near any of the groups that we mentioned earlier on, because they're terrorist groups. Now, this is the first time we've heard this, because this is a contradiction in terms. In other words, the judge is minding the terrorist groups, not the other way. This is a US citizen, you must remember, you know. So that's it too, René and Antonio. Okay, Ramon has been given a life sentence of indeterminate time. Plus. Gerardo has been given 2 life sentences and 15 years. And Magali says he has to live twice and die twice and come back again, and then he'll get another 15 years. And that's the irony of it. And her son has been given 19 years. After this sentence was passed, we went obviously to get them resentenced or to try to retrial in Atlantic City. Despite all the evidence we provided to them, all they did was, in Atlanta, we went to have it looked at and to have the retrial, and all they did was reduce Antonio's sentence to 22 years. And Ramon's sentence, just one life sentence of 30 years, and Fernando's to 17 years and 7 months from 19. So they didn't really, they knew that what the evidence that they had was admissible, but they showed their indifference to it by just barely reducing the sentence. Then we applied to the Supreme Court, even though we knew that they only accept a very small portion of the cases that are referred up to it. But we had great hope in this because we had, for the first time, encountered a lot of support for this, including 10 Nobel Peace Prize holders and a lot of people, famous people in society in the US had heard about our case and were supporting it. But the Supreme Court refused to accept the case.
Entonces
so we just had to accept the reduction in sentences for Antonio Ramon and Fernando. Sorry.
It really is shocking when you think of it. An indictment of a country that sells itself on freedom and democracy and justice and tries to spread that throughout the world when it treats people, even its own citizens, like this. I'm just, people in Ireland are always asking, how are they in prison at the moment? How are they being treated?
They're in the same situation as any other prisoner. They're not treated as political prisoners. They're just the same as anybody else that was condemned with any other a misdemeanor, or there's no special privileges and no special concessions. They're treated like ordinary criminals. The opposite to concession, I suppose, they're talking about that most of the prisoners in the prisons where they are North American citizens, so they are able to be visited by their families. Unfortunately, to visit our people in the prisons, our sons in the prisons, we have to get a visa to go there. So that is the opposite of the concession. They're being punished because they don't have any visits, and no, wait a while, no.
Just on that subject, would you be able to tell us, or do we know at the moment which prisons the 5 are in?
That's the problem. They are transferred. The 5 of them were separated. They're dispersed around the different parts of the United States. And I'll just add that it's like the Annie Maguire case and the other cases. When they go to visit them, they could arrive and they could say, no, sorry, they're gone down to Houston or they're up in Wisconsin. Any communication between them, any communication between the different prisons, it's totally prohibited. But they want to know, for example, Antonio was originally in Colorado, but now he's been transferred back to Miami.
En la Florida.
In Florida. Renee, now is out.
Ya está en la Florida.
Okay, and
what can the ordinary person, the activist in Ireland, man, woman, or child, do? And in Ireland, to highlight this case, and also, is there much that the present government, which has a Labour part to it, which is financed by the unions, what would you ask the Taoiseach at the moment, who's a Labour man all his life?
Well, there are 2 questions there now. What would the public do and what would the politicians do? Okay, first of all, knowledge is the most powerful thing that we could ask for here. And to highlight the injustice that these men who went in a mission of peace to infiltrate the terrorism in America, that they should be reneged upon and turned against them, and certainly that we should make and probably communicate with any relatives we have in the States coming up now to Obama's election, that we put pressure on them and let them know that this campaign is live. This is very important because at the moment they have a habeas corpus going, whereby they have proof to a certain degree that before, during and after the judgment was passed, that the journalists, the media hype and the journalists were paid by the government of America to hype up the case. This is our last straw at trying to get another retrial on this case. But we don't have the confidence that the American government are going to look at this favourably or even look at it at all until we don't have the exact. We know that the journalists were on the payroll of the government, but we have to trace and do an awful lot of research to trace back the cheques that were paid out. We have this evidence, but we need the evidence of the cheques to individual journalists. But we know, and we were well aware of it all the time during the trials, that the journalists, the media, were being paid by the government to hype up this. One of our main aims now is to mobilise people to bring this case to the attention of Obama before the elections. We know that he's in the middle of elections and that it's a difficult time for him, but we need to let him hear that this campaign is alive and well. And we know that if he did get into power again, that he would be aware that this campaign isn't just a ripple. It's definitely something that he has power to reverse. This is the political case that only Obama can resolve.
Sueño.
It's a dream for us mothers, but we really don't think as time is passing that we're going to see the freedom of our sons.
Ya perdimos una madre, que es la madre de Gerardo.
Geraldo's mother is already dead.
Yo también quisiera agradecerle, darle las gracias.
Aymel also wants to thank you very much for your time and for listening to us.
Sobre todo porque para eso estamos aquí, para que personas como ustedes nos ayuden a romper ese muro del silencio.
Above all, because it's like people like you that can help to break down the wall of silence that's against us.
Que este caso se conozca o se difunda más en el mundo entero dependen de personas como él.
That the only way this campaign and the reasons for this campaign are going to get through to people are from people like you who are prepared to listen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad que nos han dado.